Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Today, we're doing something slightly different. I have a wonderful guest who's been on the show in the early days and offered me some amazing advice on how to venture into the various rabbit holes that we have been exploring, and to think about and how to perhaps absorb a lot of the information that one gets. And one of the best bits of advice that he told me is, as you go down and you're presented with stuff, is to entertain everything. Don't dismiss stuff. And in the past, I may have been a little more egotistical and thought that I was right. Oh, don't worry, that's a load of old rubbish. Why would you ever want any of that? And I thought about what he said, and in this journey, I have done exactly that. And it's been a peculiar journey with lots of fascinating people, and I feel absolutely humble and privileged to have spoken to all of them. So I owe a lot to Alan James from the Circle of White Radio. Alan, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Richard. Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Now, before we get on to the thing that we're going to do, just tell everybody what the Circle of White... There we are. There you go. What is the Circle of White Radio?
Okay. Well, basically, very quickly, my journey started in 2001. And in 2010, I decided to set up a radio show with a co-host of mine called Steve. And the radio show was called Open Your Mind Radio, because we wanted people to open their mind and take another look. And after running that for 9 years every week, we took a break. We said we'd take a sabbatical, and we would take a break. And so Steve went off and did his own project. I went and started Circle of White Light Radio because I wanted to look for solutions. Everybody knew what the problems were. And, you know, talking about the problems wasn't really good from an energetic point of view. So I wanted to set up a radio show that actually talked about solutions. And that's what I did with Circle of White Light. And now Circle of White Light has kind of moved over to Rumble. So reluctantly, kicking and screaming, I start doing video interviews, and now that's kind of taken off really well, which is great. And so I've been around the block a long time, and like everybody, learning about what's going on in the world and going down the rabbit holes. I did everything everybody else did. You know, you wake up and find out what's going on, and you present the information to your friends and family, and they call you a nutter, they call you a conspiracy theorist. So as I have kind of a background in psychology, I took another look basically at how I needed to approach this subject differently to wake people up. So I started applying psychology, and that really opened the gates to everything. And part of the information that I gave you on your journey when you started was all based on psychology. So that's really where I started.
Well, Alan, it has been fascinating to go on this journey, and I have taken on board some of those psychological lessons that you related to me, and there was no pressure from you for me to do it, but you are a sensible man. You've lived around and you've seen things and experienced things, and I have taken that on board. At least I hope so. Well, you could be the one. I mean, you've been watching my my journey over the last 10 months. So what do you think?
Well, fantastic. I mean, when you started off as a nipper back 10 months ago, tongue in cheek with that, obviously. But when you started off on your journey, you know, it's strange that you probably got this email from this Irish chap, and you say, who's this Irish chap? Email me and ask me for a conversation. But when I seen the video that you did after Neil Oliver did his talk, I could see that you were ready for information, that you were pretty much open-minded. And you'd actually, you know, take it on board, and you'd analyze it and look at it, and you wouldn't just take it for what I'm just saying, you know, for face value. You'd actually look into it. So I sent you an email, and I thought this chap would be open to some information. But I can see that he's going to be going on a journey, and we've all been on this journey, and there's going to be milestones on that journey that you're going to hit. So if he doesn't mind, I'll give him a few tips on that journey to help him on his way so he doesn't fall down the rabbit hole too much on the things that I fell down and things I came across. And that's really all I did, was really contact you, and fair play to you. You came back to me and we hooked up, we had a Zoom call, and I sent you some information, and then the floodgates opened, I think. And as I said to you before we went live, your journey over the 10 months took me about 10 years to do. So that's phenomenal. So you have really had a very condensed journey in them 10 months. And obviously you're very prolific with your videos and everything else, which is brilliant. But so there you go. So I appreciate you being open-minded to get back to me so we could have that conversation. And for me to give you information now, you can confirm this because I said it in most of the emails I sent you. Don't believe anything I say. Check it out yourself.
Yes, you did say that. And as much as I can, sometimes the biggest thing that I've found is that I just haven't had a lot of time to go wandering off checking everything. And I think one of the criticisms that I occasionally see in the comments when I have a guest that is perhaps a little difficult for many people to understand is they think that I haven't, that I should have done a better research on who they were and the sort of thing they were going to present. And yet, for me, I've learned very quickly that the interview part of my channel, as separate from the monologues, which is very much my opinion, the interview is very much giving a platform to people who perhaps can't always find another platform, doesn't always get a voice, or if they do, it's not for me to challenge them. It's I just let let them say their piece, and it's really for the audience to make their mind up. If they didn't like it, they didn't understand it, well, okay, maybe the next one is for you. So I've tried to treat every guest with as much respect and let them say what they wanted to say.
Totally. Well, I could see that you had the natural ability and charisma on camera to put this information across. Yeah, I do. Definitely, you have that. I think everybody will agree with me who's watching this will say the same thing. You're doing a fantastic job. And you're critical as well with the information. And that's very important. It's what resonates with the audience. And I've said that on my own show. It's not for me to give my opinion. It's really for the audience to see what resonates with them. And with your journey, as I always say to people, everybody's on a path of knowledge. Some people are further down the road than others. You woke up or you had your journey started 10 months ago. Now, there was somebody that just started to wake up 10 weeks ago. Somebody else just woke up 10 days ago. Okay? So they're at different levels in their knowledge. And the one thing that you should always do is only give people information to the level they're awake at. Now, when I contacted you and we got talking, I mean, I know recently you were talking about certain subjects, quite advanced subjects, things that fly around in the sky, okay? And you were talking about it. Now, had I given you that information at the start of your journey, you would have thought I was a nutcase, and that was madness. So you have to take it bit by bit and go through each milestone. And as you wake up and you examine the information, then you move on to the next milestone. So what I was hopefully doing and helping you is that every time I seen you come to a milestone, I'd send you an email and give you some information on that.
And well, you did. And one thing I wanted to say is right early on, you asked me, do I believe in time travel? And and I was thinking, what does he mean by that? Is he being serious? He really took, and then because you introduced the subject in very simple terms, and I could sort of follow, and I had to go away and think about that to understand how everything is all, everything's either happened or it's happening or it's all in the one time. Time and space, do or don't exist, and I had to sort of get my head around that, and it's something I'm still getting my head around, but I'm a lot further down the understanding of that than I was right at the beginning. But your biggest advice, as I said at the beginning, was entertain everything, because the minute you say, no, that's rubbish, you may have dismissed something radically important.
Definitely.
And yeah.
And this is why today we're switching the tables, because I'm going to interview you on your show and we're going to talk about your journey. But you're correct, because like everybody, when you wake up, you give people the evidence, about certain things in the sky and certain chemicals in the sky and all that kind of stuff. And your family think you're a conspiracy theorist. So me going back to the drawing board and applying psychology, the two things that I said to you at the very start was the quote from Aristotle, which is, the mark of an educated mind is to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. For most people, it's either true or it's not true, black and white. But there's a gray area there, which is to entertain. And by entertaining everything, you're parking your ego and you're challenging all your belief systems. The second thing was a black and white interview I seen with Bruce Lee, when Bruce Lee said that if you're in a street fight, there's no point you doing stiff martial art movements, because you have to be fluid, because you don't know what the guy's going to do. Right. And I said, well, surely our belief systems, all our belief systems have to be fluid. And, what you know today might change tomorrow with new information coming in that challenges what you know, that you learned yesterday. Okay, so as long as you have a fluid belief system, your ego is packed away and you're open to everything. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole process of interviews on this on my own channel and everything else, but them two things were the two key things I said to you at the start. So we're not going to argue over the content, which is the moon made of cheese? It doesn't matter. You'll argue all night over the content. You will look at the psychology, you look at how the mind works, you look at the societal programming of people shut down. When you give them something that challenges their belief system. And trust me, only a few weeks ago, a person I know, I actually gave them something that challenges their belief system. And my God, did I learn an awful lot from that individual of how their mind works. Okay, so that's basically the core of the information that I give you on your journey, just to entertain. I said, Richard, if you just entertain the information, but obviously ask for facts and evidence. It doesn't mean that you're going to believe it. You're just going to entertain it and just let the information come in and then ask for the facts and the evidence. And that's what you did. And you've been doing a great job since then.
Well, thank you very much. So as you so rightly said, you're going to be interviewing me and asking me questions for a change at this seminal moment. But before you do, and you asked if the moon is made of cheese, I'd just like to point out, if it is made of cheese, it's obviously blue cheese, because you get that lovely blue light from the moon.
I know anyway. I know you like cheese. Okay, so we're going to switch roles now. I'm going to do the interviewing. Okay. So over the 10-month period that you've woken up, obviously, just tell us your initial feelings from over the 10-month period, to think back to when it first started to now, and your journey over the 10 months with the information you've come across and the people you interviewed. What's your reaction to that information that you've come across over the 10 months?
Well, I suppose that over the 10 months, you're constantly playing ping pong with the guests who are telling you things, and you're going, oh, that's interesting. Okay, I know a little bit about that. Oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, that sounds a little bit out there, but go on, tell me more. So you're constantly being challenged. I think for me, because of my background as an entertainer, and because I used to do sort of interviewee type shows or shows with Julia, I'm very comfortable being in front of a camera. And so I didn't feel at any point that whatever people were saying to me, that I was like, oh my God, that's dreadful, I can't cope. It was like, so in terms of showtime, if you like, when people are talking to me, it's like they may have said some horrendous things or some things that really challenged me, and I'm aware that, oh, well, I'm on, I'm being recorded, and so you're going with it. And I found that the best policy, which helped then, I guess, cerebrally, thinkingly, whatever the terminology is, that then let me think about it much, much later. So guests might be talking. You know, we mentioned time travel, or about aliens, or the cabal, and or some of the things that might be happening, So whilst I'm actually engaged with them, it's quite easy just to go, okay, that's interesting, or that's interesting, because I'm thinking of the next question. I'm interpreting what they said. Can the audience understand what they've just said? Is there anything I need to pull out or go a bit further in detail on that? Is it getting boring? You know, all those sort of presenter questions which come into mind. And then later on, you're going, hang on a minute, did they just say that such and such is going on, or did they imply, or is it possible that you... So I was playing ping pong, but because there's so many guests, I haven't really had time to get... a lot of it's been subconscious. The sort of absorbing of the information has been subconscious. And I've gone, okay, I've got a ground smacking on that. I may have gone and done a little bit of deep diving with the various links. Of course, the audience give me millions of links. Oh, Richard, if you don't know about this, have a look at this type thing. And so I would do a lot of that. And some of it was very scary. You know, we weren't really talking terribly scary stuff on the show, but in the privacy of answering emails and people sending you off to links, which is telling you about all sorts of stuff, which I guess I don't really need to go into here, because people perhaps will have an idea of the sort of thing. Things that might happen to children, for example. And you just think, my God, this is really awful. But I haven't got time to dwell on it too much, because there's another show to do. And somebody else is challenging you in a different way. That's actually been, for me, very beneficial, because I think if I only did a weekly show, I'd probably get very morose about some of the subjects.
Yeah, it can dwell on your mind, all right, with some of the information that goes through, that comes through.
Because some of the guests were coming in with very positive things, and I need to emphasize that, because we were having a lot of solutions. So people who were doing Reiki, for example, or hypnosis, or were talking about money, or the whole sovereignty thing, which was something to learn, you know, that we're sovereign beings, we're men and women, we're not legal personas, all of that. And so all the time you saw something negative, I found on the journey there was very much more positive things than the negative things. And I kept thinking, oh, we're going to win this. It's okay. It's all okay, because actually, if you don't have the fear, and I started to learn that bit quite on, and that was reflected in the monologues, where I really started to take the mickey a bit more.
Yeah, well, they play on the fear. You know, that's what they did with, you know, the things that happened 3 years ago. And when they roll out the fear with their nudge groups, the Sage in the UK and NEFID in Ireland, and because fear shuts down your prefrontal cortex and you can't think, you're in fight or flight mode, and they use that all the time. And this is something that's important, obviously, on your journey. You know, I think when I got talking to you, you were at around 26,000 subscribers, and when your numbers start going up after the Neil Oliver show that you did, how did you and Julia feel about that? Did you go, hang on a minute, what's going on here? All of a sudden, everybody's emailing me and my subscriber numbers are going up. How did you feel about that? Were you asking yourself questions about what's going on?
Well, it's true to say that Julia was very nervous about us going into this area, and of course, I had no idea I was going into this area. It was a period where I was flatlining on the old channel as we were coming into the autumn/winter. It was November, so we were coming into the winter. And I had been doing landscape heritage and nature. We'd done 5.5 years, so going out into walks around in the winter, I'd done that so many times. So many times you can talk about trees that got no leaves on, and that very soon the buds will come back, and you know, here we see. And so it would be very much treading old ground, and I was sort of just, I suppose, trying to find something else to bring to the table that would keep the audience interested. So we had no idea. Then, so as you say, then suddenly the figures are coming up. Now, of course, I have lived through 2020 and those periods, and in our live show that we did on a different channel called The Vobe Show, which was purely entertainment. When we were going through it, we were doing many more shows because people were locked down and appreciated a bit of entertainment, most of which was just fun and silly stuff and a lot of nostalgia. And of course, I was curious and a bit outspoken during that time, wondering why certain procedures were the way they were and why a certain medical option was being thrust down our throats, and I would question that. And but the audience were very negative in reply. So if I got excited about that and said, hang on, why do we do, so if I was questioning it, it was like, no, Richard, you've got to go with the flow, you know, the government know best, don't be an idiot, you know, go and get your thing and you'll be okay. And I just felt this is really weird because blatantly something's wrong and yet people can't see it. And so intuitively, the more that happened, the more pressure came on from the mainstream media and the government and then my audience. I thought, it can't be me. It's just not me. So then roll forward and we do start to see the audience figures rising up. I felt vindicated. I thought, you know, look, people really do want to hear this. They do. They're asking the same questions. They're saying what's going on. And I did realize quite quickly that I was putting it over in a tame way, in a measured. Everyone's saying, "Oh, Richard, you're very measured in how you're doing it." One reason I was measured, if I'm brutally honest, is I didn't know the answers. They were genuine questions, and it was like, well, why is the government introducing these things? What is the motive behind that? Surely, you know, a kind, benevolent, philanthropic government that we pay to do our bidding wouldn't possibly do harm to us. And of course, as I realised, actually they were doing that, and the audience were growing, and they, you know, I understood that when you look on alternative media, people who've lived it and know what's going on and are very passionate can come over rather forceful. So people on the alternative, you know, might have been very much saying some outrageous things to the moderate audience that were coming away from mainstream media. Then they would hit me, and there's this sort of dappery looking bloke who's talking in very measured tones but asking questions that they themselves perhaps hadn't considered, but they're quite good questions. Why would you want a digital ID? What's that about? And so I realised basically that people wanted to talk about it, and in time, it took about a month really for Julia to sort of go, you know what, you're right, and we must do this. And so she then encouraged me, and then we realised we were on a mission. And of course, I'd spoken to you, and the rabbit hole started to open up.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the backing of the family and partners and husbands and wives are all very important with this journey, because a lot of the time what happens in the alt media is one partner wakes up and the other one doesn't. Yes. And then you kind of start drifting apart from each other because you have different interests. It's great that you and Julia are on that path together. But something you said there was quite important. Again, I talk about the path of knowledge and giving people information that they're ready for at the point they're at. You know, if people start talking about, say, fluoridated water or something like that, you don't go off and talk to them about things flying around in the sky, because that's too much of a leap and it won't resonate with them, and they'll even call you a conspiracy theorist.
Yes.
So you always give people the information to the level they're at, and this is what you did with your narrative, because as you said, you didn't have the answers, you were just asking the questions. What a great way to do it. You know, and the law will always confirm that you know, there's nothing in the law that says you can't ask a question. You know,
no.
It's when you start making statements that's when it starts getting rocky.
Yes.
So ask as many questions as you want. That's the important thing. So your subscriber list went up, and all these people were emailing you. You must have felt, well, obviously what you said is there was something in that, and then you carried on, and now you're up to your eyeballs. Now, have you noticed something that with all this information that you're dealing with, because I did on my journey, have you gone on the emotional roller coaster? Have you been on that with Julia?
Yeah, undoubtedly, you know, as things become, as the curtain is pulled back and you realise things are not quite as they are, And the seminal moment for me was reading a book by Fergus Greenwood, 180 Degrees, which is about 700 or 800 pages. It's a massive tome of a book, and it was sent to me. It just turned up. I had no idea who sent it, but it was inscribed by the author, and it was, here, Richard, read this sort of thing. And I read it, and it was a book. It took a month to read because it was quite long, and I don't have a huge amount of time, but I love reading. And I read it. I couldn't put it down. And it dealt with things like 9/11, moon landings, and more trickier subjects. And as I went through it, it gave me a grounding, if you like, of what was basically going on. But in some bits were hard, some bits were quite harsh, but they were. The book is brilliant, and I recommend it to anybody. And in fact, I had Fergus on the show. And he said he sold about 500 copies on the back of that, so I was so thrilled. Fantastic. But it gives you a good grounding, essentially, of a whole number of things. And because of that, then you sort of go off and you go, let me just go and look at this. And you do go down this. I got very depressed at one point because you think the game's up. And you think, oh, they've thought of everything.
Yeah.
That what can you do? There's nothing. We're just useless ants, and they're stamping on us. And we can run around, but if that doesn't work, they'll just put boiling water on us, And they're teasing us a lot of the time, and they're laughing at us with all their signs and symbols and all of this. And then I started to think, well, they're not going to get the better of me, and I'm just not going to put up with it. And of course, meanwhile, lots of other people have come into my life, not just the guest, but other people have come into my life, emails, I've met people, had private discussions, telephone calls with various people and said, I'm so-and-so and I do this. And the encouragement from people has been absolutely amazing. And then, I can't remember when it was before the Better Way conference, which was in June, so March, April, probably around then, I realised that I'd been talking about the problem for quite some time, but it was essential to talk about solutions, because there's plenty of people on YouTube and other channels going, oh crikey, look what just happened, and keeping you in the fear. And they might be instructing you about what's going on, but they seem to be keeping you frightened. And I thought, we need positivity. And I'm a positive person, I'm in the entertainment business. I like to make people laugh and smile and have a giggle. And of course, I was bringing my humour, which in the past, most people weren't that interested in. I found more people have been, they laugh at my humour. But I think because you can laugh with dark humour in a way that is quite funny, because you can actually say, they're trying to kill us, and then you have a joke about it.
Yeah.
But the message has gone through, and so So to answer the question, both Julia and I did go through a roller coaster of emotions. I feel much more upbeat now. Did you see more things coming in, and you just think, I'm not going to let you penetrate my positivity anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to let that happen.
Well, I spent 9 years on my other radio show talking about the problems, and I realized that this emotional roller coaster had an effect on me, because it's, love and hate have a frequency and it can affect our body. So I made a decision that from now on, everything is to be treated as information. It's neutral.
Yeah.
Because they want us to go on that emotional roller coaster. They want us to wake up and be angry and to kick the cat and upset our partner or our girlfriend or our wife or whatever. That's what they want. So by treating everything as neutral, then you're not attaching an emotion to it. Okay.
Right.
So that's important for everybody, because otherwise you will go on that emotional roller coaster. Okay, so I learned that kind of early on when I started doing the radio show. And yeah, that journey is quite important. And how do you feel now? I mean, with your positivity, because I noticed that there was a milestone that you did hit, and you start getting involved in the talking about the spiritual side. And it's something that I talk to you about, because that happened to me in my journey when I thought, like you, we've had it. the world is controlled and it's the end. Within 2 weeks of me getting that download and getting that thought, the spiritual side came knocking, and that's how I kind of understood that there was a solution, that we had to go down that road. But I want to go back a little bit to the psychology and something that you did say, because it's very important. When I was in 2001, when somebody came to me with David Icke's book, The Biggest Secret, I did exactly what most people do. And I took the ego kicked in, the arrogant approach kicked in, because ego is made up of ignorance and arrogance. And I said, why would I want to read that book? That guy's a nutter. He thinks he's God. He was on Terry Wogan, right? Now, I didn't know any of his information. I didn't know anything that was in the book, but I was arrogant to think that I knew better than he did, with no research done whatsoever, but there's my arrogance. And then I stopped myself and I said, hang on a minute, how arrogant am I thinking that I know better than David Icke when I haven't done any research into it? So I decided to jump in and I said, right, I'm going to prove these conspiracy theorists wrong, and I'm going to research the subject so I can get into a debate with them. And little did I realize that actually I proved myself wrong, and I give myself a kicking. So, and the great thing is, Richard, that you didn't take that approach. You were open-minded and you went on that journey, and you looked at the information, and you're still doing it now. How does Julia feel about all the information? Because this is a shared journey with you and Julia. How does she feel about the information? Is she on the same wavelength as you, or does she have questions about some of the content that comes in and the guests that come in?
She certainly doesn't have any bad questions or concerns about the guests. She finds them all fascinating and interesting, and very often she'll say to me, why didn't you ask this, or why didn't you ask that, all those sort of things. I go, oh yeah, if only I'd known. And she's got 2 kids, and she's in a difficult situation with her living sort of situation, because we don't actually live together at this moment, and we're trying to sort of pull that together. So she's a full-time mum most of the time, with a 4-year-old who is very much on 100% of the time. So she hasn't got time to deep dive or go or read, because people have been incredibly generous and sent me books on all sorts of subjects, some of them wanting to get on the show to promote their book about a particular subject. And I don't really have a problem with that. If I feel it's an important subject, then if they've spent 5 years writing this thing and it's an important message and other people are going to benefit from it, then why not? But I do say to them, can you send me a copy so I can at least do as best I can, even if I only read 3 or 4 chapters of it, just to get an idea before we do something. So people have been very generous. So I try to read as much as I can, and of course the books keep coming in, which is lovely, because I love books. But just, could I have more time, please, to read them? So I guess Julia gets a lot of second-hand knowledge from me, because then a guest may say something or other, and she may have this question, but I may be able to answer that for her and say, oh yeah, we did actually talk about that before or after the interview, because not all of the interview, all of the interview goes out. I don't edit anything, but like with you today, we had a little preamble before you start recording. It's only natural that you sort of get an idea of what you're going to talk about. And some guests have very prepared notes and things they want to get over, and I don't like to have set presentations where they'll just bring their slides, because they could make their own video, they don't need me. And I like to sort of have a bit of an informal thing, and if I can make it light, if it's a hard subject, just to keep people staying with it, because it's very easy for audiences to go, oh, okay, this is a bit dull. Whereas if you can make it fun, I try to do that. So yeah, Julia, but she's very much on the same ball at the park, and she understands what's going on. And of course, we'll have conversations when we're cooking together or travelling to events now. And the other thing is, of course, at events or when I'm giving a talk, people can only access me a certain number of times. So Julia is also talking to people, and I'm not privy to what they say. And she'll say, "Oh, I spoke to this interesting chap who said such and such and such," and I think, "Wow, yeah, we must get him on the show." So she's making notes and helping get people on the show to express what they've got up their sleeve. So it's it works incredibly well.
Yeah, I've never rehearsed anything in 13 years of doing radio. It's always been off the cuff because I find that flows better. You know? Now, obviously, welcome to the alternative media, and you would have found in the last 10 months. Have you come across any attacks or this talk about shills?
Quite early on, I interviewed a chap called William Keat, who talked about the British Constitution, as he labelled it. But he was just basically talking about a constitution that we have that goes back to the Magna Carta of 1215. And I had a gentleman from an alternative party saying that we both were shills. I'd never heard that term before. I'd never come across it. He later apologised because I think he just misunderstood what we were trying to get over. It was more the principle rather than an exact set of rules or anything, than he had his notions of what he wanted to get across. And he thought we'd hijacked his concept, I suppose. But in time, I've heard that in other videos people would make and say, is Richard Vobes controlled opposition? Is he a shill? And in fact, I remember at one talk, people wrote down questions on slips of paper like this. And at the end of the talk, I was given these, about 20 or 30 of these questions. And they'd written them all in advance. And they, what do you think about so-and-so? And what's the answer to such and such? And then one was, are you controlled opposition? And I said, well, what would you expect somebody to say? What can I say? And if I say no, you're not going to believe me if that's what you think. And if I say yes, what are you going to do about it? I said, ultimately, it's by what I do, where I go, the people I talk to. You have to make your own mind up if you think that I'm a paid opposition. I mean, sooner or later, if you are, you're going to inadvertently give yourself away or do something. And, but I don't get that quite so much now. The shill and that thing. I mean, a lot of people think I'm naive. They don't understand my thoughts, and I have no problem with that. People's entitled to their own opinion, of course, and I encourage different opinions as long as it's not insulting or inciting any kind of hatred and things like that. If it's just, actually, I disagree with you, Richard. I think that's not the way you could do it. You could do this, or maybe you should try this. Very open to all of those things. But people, they don't always get that I'm open to it. They think that I'm very closed off. And I try to be as open with everybody as I can. But sometimes you don't have the time to engage with people.
Yeah, well, we've had that as well. Are you paid control opposition? And I say, no, not at all. Just please avoid my Lamborghini that's in the car park there.
Yeah.
That was paid for by the CIA. So make humor out of it. But now we know there is controlled opposition out there. And we know there's a lot of the alt media, quite more than what people realize, are controlled. Because the best way to control the system is to be involved in it, and I've come across that in the 22 years that I've been involved in this, and I've come across certain people that say they're, alt media and everything else, but you find out, when you do your research, that it's they're actually being paid to do what they do. And this is the thing with people who attack what we do. I always put down to two kinds of people. You've got your controlled opposition, the people that are paid to attack you, right? So they're being paid. So no matter what you do, they will attack you anyway because they're paid to do it, okay? Then you have the other people, out of ignorance, they just are stuck in their belief system. And when you're challenging their belief system, they're not prepared to entertain all this information, the ego kicks in, and then they have a go at you because they don't like what you're saying, because
Yeah.
they like the comfortable lie rather than the uncomfortable truth. And what you're doing, Richard, with your show is challenging people's belief systems. And a lot of people who are stuck within their ego don't like that. And that's probably why you would be attacked. And I have been attacked on numerous occasions in the years that I've done it, you know. But as like you, I don't have any problem with feedback as long as it's constructive. If it's
Yes.
just going to be insulting and rude, it just gets deleted because then people don't deserve my respect.
No, exactly. And the other thing is, I always think, what are they going to achieve by being rude to me or whoever? Because if somebody's rude to you, you're less likely to listen to them. You know, some people say, "Oh, well, I don't want you to do that because you're an ignorant blah blah blah," and come out with something, and you think, look, if you just said, I really disagree with you and these are my reasons, I would actually listen to that. But if as soon as you start calling names, it's like, well, why would I listen to that? What makes you think that by calling me names, that is actually going to ingratiate me to your point of view? Of course it's not.
Yeah, totally, totally. Now, we talked a bit on the spiritual side, and I want to get into that because you're beginning to kind of look into this from a solutions point of view and the spiritual point of view. And you did have Tracy Mayen on your show a few weeks ago, and I'm going to put my hand up to that. I was the one that suggested Richard interview Tracy because I seen some of the comments on your webpage, and it was like, these channelers, they're no good, blah, 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 send, you know, angry, angry, angry at something that all you're doing, which is entertaining what's out there. And again, letting people have a listen to it. And if it resonates with them. Now, I've known Tracy a good few years, and I've had a number of private readings from Tracy, and she's been very accurate with her readings. Leah Ray is another lady that you interviewed. Again, I've had readings from Leah, and her readings are very accurate. Now, I've been involved in the spiritual side. When I lived in London, I used to be involved in the spiritual churches in London, and I ran my own spiritual circle. So if there's some kind of rogue medium out there or somebody who's trying to pull a fast one, I'll pick up on it because I know the methods they use to do readings. You know, and I know the charlatans out there. Look, you get dodgy plumbers, you get dodgy painters, and you get dodgy mechanics. You're going to get dodgy mediums, or people who think they're mediums. I mean, that's just life, you know. But I've noticed that the spiritual side is beginning to open up, and you're beginning to question that. So how do you feel? Whereabouts do you feel you're on your spiritual path now with the more and more people you've interviewed regarding the spiritual side?
Well, quite early on, the emails that would come in would come from a number of sources. People who were spiritual in whatever form that took. People who were deeply religious and would send me chosen Bible passages, and then those that thought the whole load of things was too woo-woo, as they say. So where am I now? It's I've always felt that there was something beyond me, beyond the ego, at the back of my head. And as a 18-year-old, I read a lot of self-help books. My mother was an alcoholic, and my father left home. It didn't occur to me at the time that my father left his children with a serious alcoholic. She wasn't abusive physically, but she was abusive very, very much verbally and hence mentally, which knocked my confidence drastically. So at the time, I was reading. How I got into it, I don't know, but I was reading a lot of these self-help books, and many of them were talking about the subconscious, about reprogramming your subconscious, not taking on board what people say to you. And so I was aware of sort of mental problems, but I would never really got into religion. It was never part of the family's doctrine, if you like, or psyche. People I knew said they'd seen ghosts, but I could never see these bloody things. And I entertained a lot of this, funnily enough, but I got a bit skeptical when nothing would happen to me. Other people would see it. And then I was working with people who would say they'd go into a room and they would go, oh, yeah, there's a presence. I can feel this. And I'm going, what are you talking about? There's nothing here. What are you talking about? I can't feel a thing. And then I thought, are you doing this because I'm associated with a lot of people in acting and drama? I just kept thinking, you're doing that just to be, for people to look at you, to think you're special. You've got these magic powers that you can do this, because plainly the other people in this room are sensing nothing, and you're going, oh no, I can't tell you what it is, but it feels very oppressive. And I thought, but then you do get people who go into a new house when they're looking for a house to live in, and they go, I can't live here because there's something odd about it. And I could relate to that. And I go, yeah, okay, I can relate to that, but why can't I feel any of this? And this was the thing that it still frustrates me to a certain degree. So going and talking to more of spiritual people and reading a bit more about it. And one of the books, of course, that's been around for a long time, which I don't know whether it would be classed as spiritual, possibly The Power of Now.
I've read it. Yep.
Yeah, which takes you to focus on the moment, the very moment, and it takes you to observe your own feelings. So when you're cross and angry about something or frustrated, it says, no, just take one step back. So you're looking at how you're reacting, which is not an easy thing to do at first. It's not easy to sort of get into the moment, because you're either worrying about what's happened in the past, or you're concerned about what's happening in the future, and you miss what's now, this very moment. You're not enjoying the joy of life. But I do, and of course one of the things that you'd hear time and time again is we are human beings we're spiritual beings having a human experience. So all the time these things are sort of growing on my consciousness. And then I'm watching people like Bruce Lipton, who's talking about quantum, not mechanics, quantum theory.
You've got quantum entanglement, which is an Einstein thing. But Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about the study of epidemiology, where you can't be positive and negative. You're either one or the other.
Right. And so he's saying the thoughts are affecting you. And I think, blimey, this goes back to the 1960s, 70s, when I was reading all that stuff. And people were saying that, but they didn't know, they couldn't look through quantum microscopes to sort of actually see how things are reacting. And of course, a lot of this is esoteric knowledge from way back, the yogis and ancient, and people have been taught it. My dad was also into this. He did a lot of yogic breathing and things. So it's been with me. The biggest frustration, though, is whilst I've believed that it's all there, is other people seem to be able to either have spirit guides or do remote viewing or sense things or whatever it is, and I can't. And when I was reading that book, 180 Degrees by Fergus Greenwood, one of the things he says in the book is, have you recently if your parents have died, have you recently spoken to your parents? Have you spoken to them? And that really spoke to me, because my parents have died fairly recently. And I remember thinking that of all the people who might come back or talk to me as spirits would be my parents. And they never have, and not to my knowledge. I mean, they might have done, but I still don't sense them. And I would walk about the house on my own and say, Dad, Mum, if you're here, I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to just, something, show me a sign, do something. I just want to know you're okay. Because both of them died in sad circumstances, not nasty, painful, but drawn out deaths because of either Alzheimer's or the drinking as the body collapsed. And I couldn't really do a proper goodbye to them. It's not like you could go, thanks very much for everything, see you next time. They just sort of got into mental states that you couldn't communicate with. And so there was no real finish, and I just thought it would be lovely. So when he said that, so I have walked around talking to them, and occasionally I go, are you here? Can I communicate with you? So I'm struggling with that. But I do believe that that yes, that I'm no longer, I'm not frightened of death, if that's, you know, a human death. I'm not frightened of that, because I think we do continue, that we're part of something.
Yeah. Well,
that
they always say energy can't be created or destroyed. It just is. It changes form as we die. And one thing I just want to correct you on there, you said you can't do it. Everybody has the ability to do it, but some people have more natural ability than others. And this is why you join a spiritual circle, which is what I did when I was in London. And I ran my circle when I moved back to Ireland, because it's like a muscle. It's your psychic muscle. And if you don't go to the gym, well, your muscles aren't going to improve. So by joining a spiritual circle, and if you have a decent circle leader who'll teach you, who's a medium, experienced medium, and they teach you right, you can develop that psychic muscle and develop it. You know, people say, oh, we don't have them abilities, but you hear stories of, and this happens to people generally, where you're in the car with your partner, or your girlfriend, your wife, whatever, and you pull up the window and she turns around and says, oh, I was just about to ask you to do that. Or you think about somebody, you know, in your head, and all of a sudden the phone rings and it's them on the end of the phone, right? We all have the ability, but it's like a muscle you have to exercise.
And I don't doubt that whatsoever, that we have the ability. I think it is innate to everybody. And when I say, you know, I don't, that's the thing. And I think I'm slowly opening up the. I can accept loads of things, but it's sometimes you've got to accept that water is wet by actually putting your finger in it, and you know you can theorize that water is wet, but until you put your finger in it. So I think I do think that will happen, and I meditate more and all those things, and I think it will. And I've had some strange experiences, but I suppose it's so easy to sort of put them down to other things rather than trusting oneself. So that's work in progress, I would say. But I definitely feel that is an essential work in progress. It's just at the same time, so bloody busy. We're trying to get the content out. But at the moment, the biggest thing for me now, I suppose. Oh, so I'll come back to that point. I have a number of people who email me regularly who have got spirit guides, or they're clairvoyant, or whatever they do. And I asked one of them, what do I need to do? How do I go about this? And he said, you're doing it. You just don't know you're doing it. Because people talk about downloads, and you have this sort of concept in your head, or I do anyway, this picture of somebody going, and all this, like, oh my God, yes, now I know the answer to life, the universe, and everything, and it's 42. And you scribble away and what have you. And maybe that does happen to some people. But this particular, one of the people gets back to me and he says, you've done it again with your monologue. He's like, you're on the money. And he said, where does that come from? I said, well, it's just, I get up in the morning, or it might be the night before, and I'm just inspired. I just think to myself, well, that will make it interesting. And he says, well, that's probably it. You just don't know that that's it. So
being guided.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that's it, because if it isn't it, I don't want it to disappear, because so far I seem to be on the money with the thoughts. And also, there is something in one of the reasons I don't edit the videos, particularly the monologues. I try to do it all in one take without any edits, so it can be seen not to be manipulated or changed or whatever, because there's something about talking on the fly that it means that you have to trust yourself as you're talking. And you've got the vaguest of ideas, and then it comes out, and sometimes I think to myself, I couldn't write that. I couldn't have sat down and written that. It just came out. Okay, sometimes I'm searching for the words, and I may mispronounce words. I do that quite a lot, as in my haste to get the point. But I do feel that sometimes those monologues it's not really me coming out. But then I had that when I was writing children's books, and I was didn't get them published really, but I was writing them, and the characters would talk to you. And that, again, I feel like was not me. So maybe I am doing this, but I almost feel that I need it rubber stamped to say, you've got a spirit guide telling you, or it's your higher self, or the source, or whatever it is. I think that's just something in me that says you need validation.
Okay.
And I'm learning to trust my own inspiration, I think.
Can I give you that validation? It is you, and you're being guided. And I'll give you the rubber stamp.
Oh, thank you very much.
No, that you are being guided. I mean, the way your journey has taken place over the last 10 months can only be guided. My own life has been project managed, and when I look back at my own life of how things were put in place, I couldn't have managed it better. Definitely project managed. So when you were probably in the river and you were trying to swim upstream, and you were probably struggling a little bit. Now you're going downstream with the river, and everything's just fitting in place and coming in because you're taking the right track. And I feel that your natural ability and your charisma on camera comes over, and that's why your numbers have gone up, because people are really like what you're doing, and it's honest, it's straightforward. As you say, you don't edit the monologue, you just speak from your mind, and that's what people pick up on, because your voice carries a frequency, Richard, and I think that's very important as well. And people pick up on that energy and that frequency in your voice, not just the audio, not just the video. It was said to me as well about my show, because I just used to do radio, audio, and people said the same thing about my show, and I thought, well, that doesn't make sense. So I'm not face for radio, voice for print. Yeah. But look, it's what people have said to me. But the one thing I did say to you before we went live was, because you're so popular, this subject matter can consume you and consume your life, and you can burn out very easily. I've been down that road, and something that I want to pass on to you is, and I said to you, was you need to have me time for you and Julia. You need to be able to walk away. And I was talking to somebody in the alt media a couple of years ago about, there was a shooting in Los Angeles a couple of years ago. And I was speaking to him, and he was telling me, well, I don't know whether he had 2 guns or 3 guns, or whether there was 2 shots. And I said, look, do you believe that there is an element of control in the world by a certain group of people? And he said, yes. And I said, great. I said, now go off with your family and your kids and enjoy them and have fun with them. Who cares whether it was 2 guns or 3 guns? It doesn't matter. You know the big picture, that we are being manipulated and controlled. That should be good enough, really. And we don't worry about the small things. And I would say that with you and Julia, that you're loads of people emailing you, want to come on the show, anything else, I get that, but you have to have your downtime, or else you'll just burn out.
Yes, and the point that I was going to make, which I interrupted myself, was the big thing for me at the moment, and I feel this on a spiritual level, is nature is calling me. I feel it's very essential for me to not so much get away from the show particularly, although this would be getting away from the show, is to get back into nature. I'm in bricks and mortar in a concrete house with cars and things and LED lights and screens, and I'm doing this day after day after day. And I used to do walking around in heritage landscape and nature, trees and hills and things, and I miss that like nobody's business. And at the moment I feel that particularly strongly, that we've got to get a piece of land, we've got to start growing. This is just Julia and I, and we both agree. And so in a way I feel like when November comes and I have that year of having done this, that's the time to sort of go, right, I'm not out of it, but to really pull back, because I think by that time certain things will be happening. I have a feeling that a lot of things will be happening. People may need solace, but I can do it if I do it right, not necessarily from a homemade studio, but I can do it from a laptop and a webcam in nature. and use all those vibrations, of course, to inspire me more. But I will be more refreshed and ready to fight again. But I just know I've got to get out of this very electric environment. So I take on board what you're saying, and I am feeling a little weary of. I mean, people say to me, I used to do shows, entertainment. I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do the show, half an hour, no idea what I was doing, highly energy at sort of 5 in the morning in the shed, on the Vogue show as a podcast, as an audio podcast. And I did that for about nearly 10 years every day. People, after about 6 months, said, "Richard, you've got to stop. You're going to burn yourself out." But I never did. I'm very tenacious, and if I'm into something, I'm in it. I'm either in it or I'm not in it, which is why I'm so prolific. But I do feel that when I pull myself out and go into nature, I should be so absorbed with growing and building a new environment and be sharing videos on that, but perhaps not banging them out quite so vigorously. And I feel that's what I've got to do for my own mental stability.
Well, I'm glad you said that you're not going to walk away from it, because I know you're interested in getting a bit of land and getting back to nature, because you've said that a couple of times on your show. And a lot of people would say the same thing. We want to get away from the city. We want to go out to the country and everything else. But that's not going to stop the government impacting on your life and trying to change things. And this is why we can't walk away from it, to be honest with you, because we might have a little homestead with a little bit of land and everything else, but the government will still come in and try and impact on our lives to change the rules and the regulations and everything else. So that's why we have to keep on fighting.
Well, that's true, but where I'm sitting, I don't think the government are going to be around for very much longer. Call that whatever you like. That might be irrational thinking, but I think the collapse is on the way. And so again, trying to be optimistic, people have been saying, "Oh no, Richard, you're talking rubbish," but I think and it's a hard leap for people to understand. The government's always been there. It's always been. Well, it hasn't. You know, the Saxons did things very differently. We had king rulers. You know, we've only had governments, and this corruption, of course, has been around for a long time. But I do think that things are going to change quite dramatically, and I know that I've got to charge my batteries through nature. So I will still be there, and if the calling is urgent, I will be there as urgent as it is. So I won't disappear. So please don't think that. If I do disappear, I mean, one of the things that, and I want to sort of bring this to a close because I only usually do an hour.
Yeah.
But one of the things that is interesting and concerns me at the moment is, and I've mentioned this before, is with deepfake and AI, channels can emerge, and you can think you're looking at somebody you know and trust, and it's not them at all. And for me at the moment, getting out and meeting people in the flesh at talks, at events where they can poke you and touch you and say, "Are you a shill?" is vital. Obviously, the reach is smaller, but I want people to know that I'm real, because I feel that the 2D screen with 3D graphics can be manipulated incredibly easily, and we're seeing that all the time.
Definitely. Well, I'm an IT guy, and I use Photoshop quite a lot, and it's amazing the fakery that you can do with Photoshop itself.
Yeah.
The fact of AI and the deep fakes coming out now, I totally agree. The thing to finish up and to end on this is for yourself and everybody else, just to say that an opinion is only an opinion. It becomes a fact when the evidence is produced. And sometimes people, maybe in their arrogance or ignorance, perceive their opinion as a fact, but it's not. An opinion is only an opinion. It was when the evidence is produced. And as you always say, and something that I've said, opinions are like arseholes. Everybody has one, right? But it doesn't make it a fact. All right. The other thing, little nugget of information, when we do what we do and we put our face out there and we do the alt media platform, and we have the attacks which we mentioned earlier, I kind of applied a 33% rule, And that would be 3% of people will love what you do, Richard. 33% of people will not like what you do, and the other 33% will be sitting on the
be
fence.
Ambivalent.
Yeah, exactly. So the 66%, I wouldn't be worrying about them. I just focus on the 33%, and for anybody in the alt media doing that. But it's been great talking to you, Richard, and being open and frank in your journey over the 10 months. And what's your immediate future at the moment? I know you want to do the offset thing, but what do you have planned for the next few weeks, couple of months?
Well, more of the same. I've got a diary full of guests, and I'm forming in my mind more solutions, and getting my opinions out. Whether people are interested or not is another thing. But it is interesting that some of the things I've been saying, I've noticed other people are saying. I think there's a level of synergy going on. We're not just copying one another. I think independent minds are thinking along similar lines. So we're all sort of getting something from somewhere. And while I think there is some events that are going to take place which are going to be quite negative or challenging, I still feel that we have a huge role to play in bringing humour and positivity to those people who perhaps can be easily frightened, and say, look, it's not all bad.
Brilliant. Well, Richard, thank you for letting me interview you on your show.
That's quite all right.
And giving us a catch up on what you've been up to. So thanks for doing that.
No, it's my pleasure. And Alan, thank you so much for asking some in-depth and difficult questions of me. I've enjoyed doing it. Let's just give you another plug. Circle of White Light Radio. Where can people find you? I'll put the link in the description, but just...
Yeah, if they go over to circleofwhitelight.com or go to rumble.com and type in Circle of White Light Radio, you'll see the previous interviews that myself and Richard have done in the past, so you can check them out there. And all the psychology that I apply, all the videos are there as well.
Fantastic. There you go. Brilliant. Well, it's been nice to have the be on the shoe on the other foot. It's nice to have the shoe back again, however, as I go forward. So I'm back in control with all the knobs and levers. I hope the audience didn't find that too self-indulgent. Of course, I do slightly worry when I'm being interviewed and it's about me, because normally it's about the guests, but it's nice to do something a bit different, little twist. But Alan, thank you so much for being a wonderful host and questionnaire. See? Yeah, there you go. So,
thanks, Richard.
I've been no good at this presentation stuff. Until next time, do join me again with more guests coming up and more monologues, of course, on the channel. And go and check out Alan at Circle of White Radio. But from us for now, thanks for watching and goodbye.